It's Monday. It's the 12th of September. I'm Russ Kane. This is Men's Radio Station, and you're watching and listening to The Daily Show. I think a whole change of mood has swept the country. I know it's affected me, and I'm sure that it's affected you. It was inevitable that a lady of 96 eventually would pass. But nonetheless, that is our monarch. And I've made no secret of the fact that I am a great monarchist. I believe in the principle of it. I believe that it's kept us together. And I truly believe that Her Majesty was the glue that kept us together as a nation. This is the second broadcast that I've done just today on this subject. There is no other subject. Anything else would be seen, I think quite rightly, as rude, as insensitive and incorrect. It's interesting how much the passing of Her Majesty has affected us all. And I've seen some comments on social media, and let me be quite clear where I stand on this. Social media has been saying, well, why is everybody going to talk like this? Why is the BBC talking in hushed tones? Why is it? Yeah, because this is a period of national mourning. I will not be doing a daily show on the day of the funeral. That would be ridiculous and a shocking mark of disrespect. So we'll have the shows today. We'll have the show on Monday, on Wednesday, and Friday, and then we'll be back on Wednesday, the following Wednesday. I'm not doing a show next Monday. Neil Long is obviously having tech problems, so we're not putting him on until he's there. Let's look at some of the comments. Let's look at some of the comments that are coming in right now. What a sad time we're in. Yeah, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. We get through COVID. We crawl out of COVID. We crawl into recession. We crawl into an area where we don't know how the hell we're going to pay the bills. And then Her Majesty dies. Well, that's pretty bad. We've had a triple whammy here. And there's no sign of it getting better. I'm going to bring on my first guest, because she's waiting patiently. She's been on the show before. I'm a fan of her work, but she will understand the mood and what I'm looking for today. So, Samantha Lee Howe.
Hi. Hello, Ross.
Hi. How is this? And I'm going to ask the obvious question, as if it's like Good Morning Britain or some garbage like that. How is this affecting you?
Oh, it's absolutely devastating. You know, I really thought or really hoped that we would have her for, many, many more years. I was hoping for that 100 at least.
But it's
it's the strangest feeling.
But when we think about it, Sam, it's unrealistic. It's a pressure. It's a pressure we've put on ourselves because it is unrealistic when you think about it. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
I don't know why.
I just think it's it's still a shock, and we know she was 96.
Why is it though? And we're going to discuss this with our other guests. And if you've got time, I'd love you to hang around. If you've got to go, I understand you're a busy woman. But why is it when a lady of 96 passes, we're all shocked? But we are. We are shocked.
I think it's because she's the only monarch we've ever known. You know, most of the people that are alive now have never had
everybody
any other.
Under 70. Everybody under 70 years old. She is the only constant we have ever had.
Yes. And she's always had such dignity. She's done her duty, shall we say. It was a vocation. And I can't conceive of living the life she's lived, to be honest with you. A life of which people think is a great deal of privilege, but I see it as a great deal of sacrifice. She couldn't do everything she wanted to do.
It's enormous sacrifice. Neil, are you ready? I'm going to bring you on, but I'm not liking the picture. That's not a great picture for some reason, but okay, we'll go with it.
Kind of
Can you hear me all right?
Well, I can now. Yeah, it's not a great picture, to be honest. You're very, very blurred. But anyway,
we're working to get the picture better. I'm ever so sorry. Hello, good afternoon.
Yeah, Elizabeth Green from New York City is saying this. I always wondered what this time would be like. Well, yeah, well, now we know, and I think it's actually worse than we imagined. I mean, I've been, I was doing a show this morning, Talk TV from what time was I on? For God's sake, 4 a.m. till 5 a.m. And thank goodness I decided to wear black. I didn't know, I had no instructions or anything. Thank goodness I wore black and the tie and everything. That would have been embarrassing. The situation is this. I was very honest. I've teared up many a time since Thursday.
Too.
Many a time.
Yeah.
And you see, this is what I want to ask you, Sam. It's illogical. I don't know about you. I never met the Queen. I've met most of the members of the Royal
Queen.
I've met most of the members of the Royal Family. Some of them several times, but I've never met Her Majesty the Queen. I probably would have fainted if I had. So I never met her. So this is a total stranger, and yet I am so affected by her passing that I keep tearing up. Now, the horrible cynics, and I'm going to put Julie Burchill, who I was a big fan of until a couple of days ago, because I just think she's so much better than that. They're just saying.
I'm not sure who she is actually. Julie Burchill.
She's a writer. A
Right,
writer
sorry.
that I've known for many. No, not at all. She's very different to you, Sam. Very, very, very different writer to you. Is it because it marks our own mortality? Is it because we think now we're going to head into unstable times? It's a very British thing.
I think it's all of those things. I think it's all of those. I think as long as the Queen's still alive, there's hope for us all.
Yes, but why? Isn't that interesting? That's what I said this morning in the TV show. And I'm thinking, but why is that? Why is that? Why is it that we think that a lady that we have never met somehow will keep everything together? Why?
Because she stands for everything that we consider to be great about about Great Britain. She's everything. And we know that times are changing. I don't know what it's going to be like under the new king. That makes me feel insecure.
It'll be interesting. That's so much better, Neil.
Yeah.
Thanks, pal.
It
will be
interesting.
Makes
me feel insecure.
He's a very caring man. He's been waiting for this all his life. He's been training and trained for this all his life, and I think he has a huge sense of duty. But here's something that I'd like to ask. I'm going to, and Neil, jump in whenever you want. It's just something that's been buzzing in my head a lot. Sam, we live in a digital age. You, for your career, have to rinse it, same as we do here on. Oh dear, Neil is having terrible problems today. What's going on? You have to use digital stuff all the time. I have to use digital stuff all the time. That's how we created men's radio station, and women's radio station, all these things. I understand that. The great thing about Her Majesty the Queen was that we knew nothing about her. She never gave an interview. She never told us her views. What she did not do was sell out to Spotify and Netflix and all this crap.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, she didn't. We know so much about Charles because he lived in an age of the paparazzi.
Yes.
Her Majesty didn't. So that mystique, that sense of, well, we don't know what she actually thinks, that's gone. We know what Charles thinks. We know what he thinks. We don't know what Camilla thinks, by the way, but we do know what King Charles thinks because he's been very vociferous about it. Do you think, Sam, that that's weakens the position of the monarchy in a way?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm actually thinking that Charles might be a very interesting change, as much as I'm mourning the Queen, because the Queen is just she's almost like a grandmother to us all. There's somebody that's always been there, somebody that we always feel we could rely on. However, I don't think it would be a bad thing to have a monarch who is a bit more outspoken. I'd like to see change in the sense
In
of.
what way? What do you want to see? What do you want
Well,
to
our
see
British
change?
politics has been an absolute disaster for so long now that I have no faith in the government whatsoever. I really don't. And
Would
I
you
don't
have a
speak
faith
about
in? Let
politics
me
very much.
ask a leading question then. And I don't know your politics. I don't want to get into politics.
No.
I just lose my temper. But would you have faith in another party? No, they're all midgets.
No,
Why
they're
don't we
all as bad
face
as
the
each
facts?
other.
Why don't we face the facts?
Yeah,
And it's so weird. This is a theme
they're
that
all
I was doing
awful.
on TV this morning. We have no faith in politicians whatsoever. They're
Stop,
midgets.
full stop.
They're
Exactly.
out there for themselves,
Yeah.
or they're career politicians and have never worked an actual day in their life. And please don't tell me they've got lots of paperwork. It's not the same as being in a coal mine or, working in a factory or whatever it is. It's not the same.
They just
It's not
don't
the same. They've never had a
understand.
job.
They don't understand real people. They have no connection with it, with what it's like to be a person, an average person on the street. And I mean, like you, I'm so frustrated. I don't trust any of them. I wouldn't. I have no clue what I'm going to vote for.
And Sam, the thing is, and Neil, you're very quiet today, but the thing is,
I'm waiting for my moment.
Right.
Well, your moment, fella, is whenever you decide it's your moment. That's how
Yeah.
it works. You know that. You know that. Come on, man. It's they've done nothing to engage our trust
Yes.
ever.
Do you
Ever.
not think it might be a new beginning? I've found a kind of a mixed emotions here, working in media. And by the way, good afternoon, Samantha. Lovely to have you on the show.
Hi.
I spelled your name wrong. What an idiot.
Sorry about the
So
technical
sorry,
problems as well, frantically pressing buttons. I've noticed there is a kind of collective grief, if you like, but it's balanced with a kind of excitement, a kind of a new beginning, the end of one era and the beginning of another. The end of the I was thinking
really,
about it,
really,
the end of the Elizabethan era.
correct.
And it's a big thing, and I think people. I do think there is a renewed sense of hope. I really, really do.
I whatever you've been smoking, I want some. And I want you to come round to my home.
Lights?
I want you round at my home this afternoon, and I'll smoke it with you. Jesus, I think there's a great sense of fear. I don't think there's a great sense of hope. I don't feel that
both
at
in
all.
the mix. I think it depends where you look.
Yeah.
I look around.
I'm a natural optimist. Usually, but I am a bit scared. I am. I'm erring that way. I'm scared.
I tell you what I think. I tell you what I think.
Also interested in what's going to happen.
It is
interesting.
It is interesting because he's a very deep thinking man. People mock him. I've met him 5 times, and if you meet him, you have a very different impression of the king than you do just from the stupid tabloids who, will write any old crap.
That's the point, isn't it? The tabloids don't speak.
They don't speak. I'd like to bring on our next guest. So it's a bit more of a round table feel today. I'm just running the changes.
Nice.
And this lady is a expert on grief, and I thought this was absolutely
perfect,
appropriate. If for nothing else, to explain it to me, I'm being totally selfish. Why the hell I feel like this? Welcome, Stacey Hart.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Stacey. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Stacey.
Thank you for joining us. Now,
because I noticed, and this is all about mental health, so I'm very happy to be very open. And I'm sure Stacey you can help explain this. And I put a post on Facebook about it as well. Felt inspired to do that. I saw the picture of the Queen in the papers. It was just after, I think it was the picture just after she'd met Liz Truss, and all I saw was a frail, elderly lady.
I did too.
Yeah, a human being. I saw the very human side because that does connect us all. We are all, like it or not, all human. And then it reminded me of my mum, who passed a couple of years ago, and I was in an absolute mess. And I thought this must be normal for perhaps unresolved feelings of grief to come up when it's something that's important to the whole country, like a national sense of grief. And it's not a bad thing, maybe. So you've only been on 10 seconds, and I've thrown that question at you, Stacey.
It's a great question, and
I think
Stacey, it gets to the very heart of the matter. So, Off you go.
I think it taps into everyone's grief. At the moment, what we're feeling is a collective grief around the country. Every time we turn on the television, we hear the word death, died, this wonderful figurehead has died, which could be anyone's mother. And it's kind of bringing back our own grief. I think some of us are crying for her. And as we said, it's not, she's a 96-year-old woman, but it's bringing back our feelings of grief and how we feel. Maybe if, our mothers have died, that feeling, and thinking about the royal family, how they must be feeling at the moment. And I think it doesn't matter what age your mum is when she dies. It's still your mum, and she's still not going to be here anymore. I also think that we're living in a very uncertain world at the moment. And I think this is tapping into our feelings of uncertainty. And it's quite frightening, isn't it? Change is always scary. Transitions are always difficult. So I think it's tapping into a lot of things at the moment. And it kind of feels quite dark. We're coming into the winter. Everything feels a little bit unsafe at the moment.
Isn't it interesting though? And I agree with all of those things, Stacey, but we all say, just before you came on, we were talking about, what's going to happen, and people want change. People have been campaigning and shouting about change ever since people have been on this planet, and yet we're all scared to change.
But
yeah,
hang on, Neil, I take exception to this. I don't mean with you. I take exception to what you're positing, because many of these people are screaming into their own echo chamber. It's no different from Corbyn's supporters. They scream into their own echo chamber. They all agree with each other, and they're all delusional. They're delusional with what they think could have happened, should have happened, would have happened. None of it would have happened. It's just a fantasy that they have and they buy into. So this thing about change, I don't know anybody who wants that change. Or is it a generational thing? A friend of mine works in an office. I'm not going to say where. They are my friend is the oldest person there. Not old by any means, but everybody else is like in their 20s and 30s. And they're all Republicans. And they feel no loyalty to the royal family at all. I would go deeper
That's
say
very fair.
what type of people
I have noticed
they are.
a lot of people. I have noticed a lot of people jump on this as a kind of a excuse to trumpet their own agenda, and I take issue with that as well. Just on a very, very human level, she's a human being. She's someone's mum. How King Charles got on TV and addressed the nation, because I couldn't have done that one day after losing my mum.
No, I couldn't.
Stacey,
I couldn't.
let me ask you this. And Neil's point is so good, and I was talking about it earlier today. When you lose a parent, it's horrible. I've lost, but my dad died 22 years ago, and mum went a few years ago after 16 years of dementia. So it was a happy release as far as everyone was concerned, because it wasn't really my mum anymore. But it hurts. It hurts, and I miss my parents every day. It's ridiculous. I'm a grown man, but I miss my mum and dad every single day. And so wish I could pick up the phone and say, hey, guess what happened today? Guess who I met? Or, something like stupid stuff like that, or just go around and have a cup of tea or something like that. So it puts us into a horrible state of grief. Imagine that any of us, anybody watching and listening all over the world, and Asia and everyone watching in America, which they are at the moment, you have to go and meet the most powerful people and give a speech that has to be perfect. And then you have to give a speech to the nation that has to be perfect. And you will be judged on that. How the hell do you pull that off?
Can I just compare it to something else? You often see at funerals people giving eulogies, and it most probably is the child or a relation. And you actually think, how do they stand up and do that? But something takes over.
Yeah, Dr. Theatre.
And also when somebody first dies, you're not really feeling. You're in a state of shock, and the feelings haven't kicked in yet. You're in a trauma phase, you are surviving. So at this moment, they most probably can't even get their heads around that she's died. You know, they still expect her to walk in the room. How many people do you hear when somebody dies? I expect them to phone me at any time when the phone rings. I think it's my mum. And it takes a while for that grief to really set in. So at the moment, that's where the royal family are.
And I think also a lot of people were denied a funeral, weren't they, because of COVID? So maybe there's a bit of a backlash from there. I mean, they said there was going to be a mental health backlash after COVID. Maybe this is the tail end of that. Stacey, how come you're an expert on grief? I've found grief the most difficult emotion to go through ever. It really knocked me sideways. And it's taken me a good couple of years to get my mental health really back on track.
I've been in this field for 20 years. I don't know how. I worked for one of the UK's leading bereavement charities for 12 years. And I know lots of people say, how do you do it? But it's something we all have to go through. And we do live in a death-denying society.
That was going to be my next point.
We put death on
Can
the
you
map.
say that phrase,
Stacey,
say that phrase again, please?
Death-denying society.
Oh, God, yes.
And as a consequence of that, there aren't really many great, apart from the odd exception, the odd jewel in the mud like you. So that's a terrible analogy, sorry. but what I'm saying is very, very few people even know how to deal with it because, like you say, it's a death-denying society. And when it does happen, we don't know how to deal with it. Now,
look at this.
Which makes it worse.
May I just point this out to my guests, why this is a very important... I've put it up on screen. Chrissy Richards watches the show regularly. She lives in Spain. And she lost her son only a few weeks ago, who very sadly took his own life.
Oh, goodness.
So she's grieving from that. And as she says, I'm already... And I read these things out, our guests wouldn't know, because this show is streamed to Deluxe Radio. Over 70,000 people listen to this show just on Deluxe Radio, who we give the stream to. I'm already grieving now. It's double losing my queen. It's hard to cope. Why?
Notice the pronoun.
I'm going to throw that out. Yeah.
Notice the pronoun, my queen.
Yeah, my queen. Yeah.
I think, from a personal level.
Sorry, go on, Sam.
Sorry, go on. From a personal level, I think when you're already going through grief, your tolerance level is very, very low to take any more bad news.
When you're grieving, the slightest thing, because I had a bit of grief, bit of burnout, bit of depression, well, kind of all thrown in one, but I was like in a not a good place. And I found the triggers, things that normally wouldn't bother me, cut an awful lot more deep. And then in the healing process, I found the triggers were getting less intense, less regular, less long, less regular, and keep going up exponentially, less intense, less regular, less long, until it starts to fade and the light starts to come back. And it does come back. It does come back. Grief is supposed to be a healing emotion, isn't it? It's not there to torture us. Stacey, here's a good question. What's the purpose of grief?
Purpose of grief is to honour somebody we love. It's, I think, a natural feeling. I think the purpose is, I don't know the purpose. It's actually a question that I don't think I've been asked before, but it does have its purpose. And it's a rational emotion. So, a lot of emotions we feel can be irrational, but it is rational. And it's something that you have to go through. There's no time limit on it. It's not over in a day, a week, month, or even years.
Oh, exactly.
People still grieve 10 years later.
I remember discussing this with a friend of the show, Liz Saul, that presented with you one day, Russ.
Yeah.
And she tragically lost her mum. And she said even the world leaders, the world religious leaders, who don't maybe agree on much, but they do agree, this is one from the Christian faith, one from the Jewish, that the grief journey is different, even if you're mourning the same person.
I was told by I went to a grief counsellor because my wife died, and young, and I found it absolutely useless, to be perfectly honest with you. It didn't work for me at all. But what I did take away from it, but I knew that it was going to be, I was in for a very rough time because the twins were just 5 at the time, so it wasn't going to be exactly a walk in the park. And the grief counsellor said one thing which has always stayed with me and I thought was brilliant, was that how long should you grieve? Well, one day is too short and a lifetime is too long. And I thought that was the wisest thing that I'd heard on the subject before or since, frankly. I thought it was excellent.
I have a problem grieving because I hate crying. And I think this is one of the things that I found really difficult last few days, because I'm tearing up all the time, and I have to turn TV off. I have to just go and watch something else, because it's. I think it's everybody deals with things in different ways, and for
I
me,
think
that's the
also,
way of dealing with it.
I agree, Samantha, and I think also, like Stacey says, it's a death-denying society, and I think that we think there's some emotions we shouldn't be allowed to feel. Some people think I shouldn't be angry, and they suppress their anger, or I shouldn't feel this, or I shouldn't feel grief, or I'm a responsible adult, I'm feeling like a child. Why do I feel like this? Why am I tearing up? What is this all about? But it's like we said, it has a purpose. It's there for a reason, isn't it? And it is allowed to feel these things.
And the other thing is,
it's allowed.
To come back what you were saying, Sam, and then Stacey, I've got so many questions for you. But Sam, I mean, you're very successful, you're very switched on, and I'm just wondering, and I've met you a couple of times, but I just wonder whether you think I shouldn't be. I'm Samantha Lee Howe. I'm a mover and a shaker. I'm a highly successful writer. I got, my stuff's being made into movies. Blah blah blah. I shouldn't be feeling like this, but you do.
I don't think I shouldn't be. I do. It's just part of me doesn't want to, because I don't. As I say, I'm a very positive person. I hate to feel unhappy and down and depressed, and the last few years have been really, really hard on everybody's mental health.
Horrible. It's been horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
And I guess this is it's almost like the culmination of that, the conclusion of it now.
And the other thing is this. Can I ask? I'd like to ask Stacey this, and this is. I don't think you've been asked this. I doubt it, because it's a strange kind of media question.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people may have been thinking, you know what? I've got to get away from the TV. I'm going to watch Neil and Russ's show on Men's Radio. Bit of light relief. We can't, in all good conscience, put on our usual pony and trap show and lark about, because it would be so. First of all, I don't feel like doing it, and even if Neil wanted to do it, I'd say no, I ain't doing it now. And secondly, it would be so disrespectful. But is there such a thing as fatigue from all this? We've got a week, more than a week of mourning. The funeral is not till next Monday. So do you think there's a tipping point when people say, I can't take another minute of this. I'm going to put a rerun of Friends on.
There is such a thing as compassion fatigue, and I'll imagine it falls into the same category.
I think that's okay. I think everyone should do what they want to do. I don't think that everyone as a nation has to feel sad the whole time. I've worked with children who have been bereaved, and we say to them, it's still okay to laugh and have fun. You puddle jump into kind of different emotions. So you might feel upset, you might feel angry, but the next moment you might be having a laugh, or maybe turning on an episode of Friends, and that's okay as well. We do not have to sit here for 10 days grieving. And I know kind of in some religions, they celebrate, a few days after the death, or they have, people coming around to their houses where you can laugh and share memories. And I think that's okay too.
I so agree with you. It's not like say that there's no have to, should do, ought to do. There's none of that. It's what you've put it beautifully. It's what you want to do. Yes, I think it's important for me personally to feel all the emotions that come up, because if you resist them, they just kind of get worse. So selfishly, I want them to pass as quickly as possible. So I just allow them to flow, allowance rather than resistance. Having said that, I don't think I should be not open to having a laugh, having fun. Joy isn't banned because this has happened, of course, and it's good to be respectful, but just true to yourself, I guess.
And I rarely speak. I'm not a spokesman for the media. I'm the last person who would ever put themselves up to be such. But please understand, I know everybody on screen understands, but please understand, listening around the world and watching around the world, that the media has to do this. They are under an obligation. Some of it is a legal obligation. Some of it is a moral obligation. But if you're sitting there going, for God's sake, stop talking, you know, you're screaming at the television. Why are you talking in such muted terms? Why are you? I'm seeing this on social media. For God's sake, get a grip. They have to do that. It is part of the charter. It is part of the contracts. It is part of the understanding between the broadcasters and the authorities. It has to be that way, whether you like it or not. So don't, for once, I'm saying don't always blame them. There are so many wonderful things coming in. Can I read this? It's slightly long. In fact, Neil, I'd be grateful if you forgive me, everybody.
I certainly will. I've just seen from Samantha, though. She's saying she's going to have to go shortly.
Oh, what's this? What's this?
I'm actually on holiday.
Oh, you're on holidays.
I'm getting a taxi very shortly. It's coming for me to take me to the airport.
Just before you go, and I'm going to be absolutely blatant.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to be blatant. I'm going to hammer this in with a mallet. Tell us what's happening with you. There's something exciting that's happened. I'm changing the subject just for a second.
Oh no, we don't need.
Go on. Just say it. I want you to say it. Come on.
I've got my film's out in the UK at the moment, which is great. It's called A Stranger in Our Bed, made from one of my best-selling novels.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
it's great.
Thank you. But
bless you, but great. That's
much respect.
We'll talk about it another time.
We'll get you back and we'll talk. But I didn't want you to think, well, God, I dragged myself on. I'm missing the taxi. Bless you, Sam. You go.
I wanted to talk about this, to be honest, Ross. So it's a subject I did want to talk about, and. You know, so I'm with you on it, and you know,
and the bad news is now we've found you. We're going to get you back. So you know,
sorry about that.
Always
have a lovely break. Have a lovely break.
Thank you, Samantha. Enjoy your holiday. Congratulations.
Bye. Yeah, it's got.
Pop that message on the screen. I'll give that a read.
Right, if you would be so kind. Right, this is from Ramsey. Here you go.
The grief is different this time, as people accept that a 96-year-old who had a wonderful life was going to pass away soon. The death of Diana, as shocking as unforeseen as it was, saw people genuinely upset as her death orphaned 2 young boys, and the accident could have been avoided. The Queen's death is a chance to celebrate her life, and people take solace that she can be united with her much-loved husband.
Let me jump in straight away. The boys weren't orphaned. Sorry, Ramsey, the boys were not orphaned. They lost their mother like my twin sons lost their mother. They weren't orphaned. Their father was very much alive.
Yes, that is correct.
Let's just modulate our language here. And yes, the accident completely could have been avoided. That's what happens when you get an idiot at the wheel driving at over 90 miles an hour in a Parisian tunnel when you're supposed to be doing 30 miles an hour. It's not going to end well. Also won't end well if you refuse to put a seatbelt on. Sorry. There you go. Let's just look at the facts.
And again, though, Ramsey,
the facts.
Again, that opinion is absolutely right for you. It's all people's different points of view. And I think one thing I've picked up from Stacey is that we all deal with it in our own different ways. This is what Asa Don Brown is saying. There's no absolute when it comes to grief and loss. It's a process that takes time, and each experience is unique. It's best, and I believe this, I think I've touched on this already, Asa, it's best to allow the grief to occur, and that we take our time to heal. That's another thing, because we live in such an instant gratification society, Stacey. Yeah. We think we can deal with grief as quickly as we can order a pizza, and it just doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't work that way. It's not over quickly. And I think, you know, as I said, this time when somebody just died, you're not even feeling the emotions. You know, 3 months' time when you start really missing them, you realize they've gone, you start thinking about things. And I just like to just comment on the Diana and the Queen. Diana was a tragic death. She was a young woman with her life ahead of her, 2 young children. As we do say, the Queen had a wonderful life, 96 years, and we are still entitled to grieve. But I think it's very different to the death of Diana, right? I do believe that. And you can see at the palace the difference in between the collective grief, we call it, with, you know, the mood with Diana being one of anger and complete sadness, where this kind of feels now with the Queen more calm, more respectful. There's a different kind of vibe and ambience going on, I would say.
The interesting thing, you've used a very interesting term about anger. And I'll come back to one of my points in a sec. But this is this. When Diana died in an automobile accident, everyone was angry, but they didn't know who to be angry at. They were just angry. I think they were angry at the situation.
Yeah.
Angry that the woman that they'd invested in, that they'd created this myth around. You know, she was not. She was. I met her a few times. She was dazzlingly, spectacularly beautiful for reasons that, when you looked at her individually, the features weren't beautiful. She walked into a room, it's like a light bulb went on. It was quite extraordinary. Every time I met her, it was the same thing. But you know, she was not an easy person, and we've got this myth. You know, she was a saint and Charles was the devil. Yeah, well, you know, it wasn't great all round, putting it very mildly. But she was not an easy person. But we were angry, but we didn't know who to be angry at.
That's called
situation.
misplaced anger and misplaced grief. So we're angry and we feel this emotion of anger, but we don't know why we're angry.
That's interesting.
I think, again, but we have so little emotional training in this society, don't we, Stacey? So we're not emotionally fluent. I think the next evolution, if you like, of human beings is going to be learning to manage ourselves. We always try and manage everything that's going on outside. It seems to me nowadays, the trend seems to be going towards self-mastery, particularly for people in personal development, spiritual development, all those sorts of things. It's the self, isn't it? It's not about the other or what's going on out there. It's not, is it?
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's about kind of coming to terms with things ourselves and working on ourselves, self-development, self-awareness. And we are going more towards that.
I agree.
But there's a line between that and me.
It's not the same thing.
Which
it's completely not the same thing.
I won't go down that road. I'm so tempted, but I just won't. Now, Stacey, the stages of grief. Walk us through them.
Okay, so we could talk a few theories. So if we're talking about the stages of grief, which is a little bit antiquated now, that's Kubler-Ross.
I've heard of her, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Yeah.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So she was actually worked in a hospice and she worked with the dying. And the first stage, she said, was shock and disbelief. And that is a stage that I absolutely agree with, because it's now been proved that our body goes into a trauma mode and we protect ourselves and we just can't believe what's happened. Then she says after that, we go into an angry phase, which we talked about before, anger, which can be misplaced. You know, why has this happened? I feel so angry. Then after that, we go into bargaining. So she said bargaining was like, I'd give up everything I own just to have my mother back. You know, just kind of like magic thinking, what could I have done different so this wouldn't have happened? And then we fall into a depression, she said. And then after the depression, when you come out of that depression, you come to acceptance. So I believe that the royal family will be able to come to some acceptance that, you know, she died at 96, wonderful life. But then if we go back to maybe William and Harry, should they ever accept that their mum died so young? So that's my glitch with the stages of grief. I think there's a really lovely theory that I could use. It's called Growing Around Grief, and it was written by somebody called Tonkin. And they says grief is a black dark circle. And that circle never goes away, but your life grows around it. So if you can imagine like a fried egg, but the white on the fried egg getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the grief is there. We can still revisit it. It stays there. But as our life gets bigger, we go back less often. We don't feel it as intense.
Less regular, less intense, less often.
Yes.
I'll tell you what I'll tell you my take on it. I'm no expert. I just had to try and live through it far too often. Is this, at first, it's like a splitting migraine.
Yeah.
All you can think of is this terrible pain. You can't do anything else because if you've ever had a migraine, by the way, you get what I'm saying. Thank God I've only ever had one once. Thought I was going to die. It's like a migraine. Then it goes down to a sort of bad headache. And then eventually, but over time, it goes to a background hum. But you learn to live with the fact that background hum is always there. And I'm going to be very honest, it's always there in the back of my head. I have learned to cope with it. I've learned to do all the work that I need to do and be creative and whatever and function. But it's always there as a low murmuring background hum. But I've learned to work around it. And that's the only way that I can describe grief.
it's also really worth saying to you and to anyone that's grieving and is managing to hold it all together, because obviously when somebody dies, I described it as a learning curve at the time you least need it. I was not in a, when I want to learn something new, I'm receptive, I'm open, I'm interested, I'm curious. Curiosity is the best emotion for learning something new, isn't it? All of that goes out the window with grief. Grief is grief.
Yeah.
It's none of those positive, receptive states. And then to have to learn complicated financial law, complicated legal things, make decisions like, this is before my mum died, like signing the DNR, do not resuscitate. That's that felt like murder.
That was a nice day. God,
and another
that was horrible.
and another term I've heard, an interesting one, is pre-grieving, where you kind of get the grief over and done with first, so when it does happen, it's not as bad. There's a lot of...
I did that. You're so right, Neil. I did that with my mum because, as I said, she had 16 years of Alzheimer's. I lost her effectively so many years before she physically died. So I'd been grieving for all that period of... Does that make sense? I've been grieving for all that period of time. So when she went, it was okay.
Yeah,
really, in my head, she'd gone.
I definitely believe that. I see it a lot with, families who have someone dying of cancer, terminal cancer. They know they're going to die, and they do a lot of their grieving before they die. But somehow it still comes as a shock the day that they do die.
Yeah.
And
free grieving isn't it's not a get out of jail free card, is it?
It's not, but it can kind of help. You realize that you're going to have to live without this person. You might start making provisions. So as you talked about, there's lots of new things to do when somebody dies, so you might kind of start doing those sorts of things already. So there definitely is grief before it actually happens. And grieving is a massive term. Grieving can be any losses. It can be from divorce. It can be from loss of a job. It can be from loss of mental health.
I never considered it could be. I always associated grief with a bereavement. But I spoke to a wonderful lady, Eleanor Tweddle, her name was, and she'd written a book about grieving the loss of a job. I know.
What's the name?
Grieving the loss of a job. And now, if you Google her, she helps people through that. She's turned the healing corner, as we call it, and she's now helping people move through that transition and be happy again, which is wonderful. But grief doesn't just apply to people. You're right. Pets. There's another one.
Pets. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Would you like to read this, Neil? I'm so sorry to obscure you, but it's a long thing from David Wimble, who's the Grand Finale.
That's all right. My ego will allow it just this once. David Wimble says, it's like comparing 9/11 to the passing of the Queen. It came out of the blue like the death of Diana. You'll always recall where you were and where you heard the news. Yep, I remember exactly where I was, David. One life is just as important as any other life, of course. But when you live life from the spotlight, you get a ripple of grief that spreads across the world, especially now in the world of instant media. Wise words, sir.
This one from our pal.
Liz, that filled in for me one day, broadcasting with you as a broadcast journalist.
Oh, she was very good. Very good. Oh, she was good.
She is good.
Go on. Are you going to read it?
As a broadcast journalist, you do have to keep your emotions in check. It's tough. There's a great deal of information which we have to then say to our audiences. The first time I heard the new national anthem and sang it, it was emotional, but I had to read the news off the back of it. It's very hard to switch off. However, I do manage some rest and we'll have downtime before the funeral. Self-care. If there's one thing, if there's one good thing that could come out of grief, it's learning self-care. Because I reckon most of us are running around like a blue ass whatever and literally don't take any time for ourselves. And self-care, self-development, and it's not the same as me, is important. You can't give from an empty cup.
Absolutely. I think that, when you get on an aeroplane and somebody says that before you put in your children's oxygen mask, you have to put on yours. And I think if we look after ourselves, we can't look after others and our environments around us.
No, you can't.
So it's really important that we do take care of ourselves. So it might be, for instance, switching off the news. It might be, let's have dinner tonight. Let's not put on any television. Let's not talk Queen. Let's think of something else. That is okay. That is looking after ourselves, and it's really
be excellent to yourself and each other in that order.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you something that I found out at 4 o'clock this morning, and this is the first time this has ever happened, ever in the history of the greatest city in the world. I'm talking about London. Sorry about that, Asa, but he lives in northeast New York. London will officially be full next Monday.
Oh,
Think
really?
about that. London will officially be full. That has never happened in the history of this city.
Wow.
I can't even imagine what that means.
What does fall look like in London?
Well, London's not exactly, open
always
meadows
full.
and open
Yeah,
meadows where you can stroll happily with your
absolutely.
dog off a leash. It means that every hotel everywhere will be at 100% capacity. And that was an official statement, by the way. That's not somebody, the Daily Star or something to say, oh, London's going to be full. It's actually what's going to happen. Never happened in the past, ever. It's going to be quite extraordinary. The
So people are
logistics,
travelling to London for the funeral.
all over the world, of course.
All
They'll
over
be
the
from all
world,
over the
yeah.
world. And just think of the logistics. The logistics of having to do this is immense. Immense. And you only see the surface. You don't see what goes on with the security services, with everything else, because we shouldn't know. We should not be told. Right? And I'm not Julian Assange. I think, these things should not be in the public domain. What have we got this? We've got this about COVID. This is coming in from Ken. Would you like to read it, Neil? Would you be so kind?
Producer Ken, many people during COVID, like myself, were prevented from being there with families and prevented from holding what would be classed as a funeral. Yeah, Zoom funerals. That was a thing, wasn't
horrible, absolutely disgusting. And this is a big one. And from Leslie Demesa, these past few days have opened up so much grief in me. It's 16 years since my father died, and nearly 10 since my mother's death. I carry both my late parents with me daily. Oh, absolutely. In so much as I say, in what I say and in my behaviours. They must have been fun then. I miss them both beyond words. They will always be in my heart, but I prefer if they were really here. Yeah, that would be great. Wouldn't that be lovely? And this goes back to what you were saying, Stacey. This is Paul Endicott, who has a wonderful company doing tours in a sort of magic bus of where all the rock people, the Beatles or the Stones or rock history of London. It's a great tour. He says, my divorce resulted in deep grief from the loss of my family, and for inverted commas family, for everyone listening on Deluxe, a different type of grief which I've lived with for 12 years. Well, yeah, absolutely right.
Stacey, that opens up another question for me. Because we're not well trained in this, and because there's experts like you, a few and far between, asking you as an expert, are there things we can do to help us move through grief more quickly? We know, that I've seen exercises to move through anger more quickly, and through various emotions. What about grief? Are there things we can do?
Well, I think actually counselling can help. Because you can get stuck in certain emotions.
Well, this is what some people fear. They fear if they let those emotions go, we've had it on the screen today, the floodgates will open and they will never, ever get back. And that was a fear of mine. I thought I'd be in the dark forever and I would never get back to what I consider mental health. And that was frightening. That was really frightening. I mean, it's not true, I'm pleased to say, but it is a fear. Can you address that?
Yeah, but I think what you might be saying is, can we finish grieving at a quicker pace? I don't think so, because what we could do is we could disassociate with our grief. We could put a lid on it. But then 6 months, a year's time, 5 years' time, that lid is going to come off and explode like a volcano. I think it's a process that we have to go through, and I think we have to trust the process. And if we can get some support, some help, we use our networks. We don't keep things in. We speak to people. But I just think that there's no kind of quick, fast, magic wand way of moving through grief quicker.
No, I realise that. I wasn't hoping for a magic pill. But are there things that can make the transition smoother? Maybe.
I think
as we go through the process.
I think the best way is working with your memories of the person that died. So it's really important that we continue bonds now. So that might be in the way of photos, talking to that person, feeling that they're with us in our everyday life, asking their opinions, just keeping them with us rather than trying to push it away. And the connection is really, really helpful. And they say to children now to stay connected with memory boxes, remembering. And it's not like Freud 100 years ago who said you have to disconnect with the dead person and move on. Things have changed now. So I think continuing bonds is really important.
Is that what Freud
It's
said?
yeah. Well,
Yeah, in
I'm not a
Morning
big,
the Melody.
I'm not a big fan of Freud, to be honest with you.
No.
Although I loved Clement. Now, here's a question for you, Stacey.
Sure.
When is it? I'm trying to phrase this in a way that makes sense. What is an okay amount of grief, and what is like, you're not well, you're now obsessing, you better get some serious help? Where are you on that scale?
Okay, so when it moves into complex grief, it might be somebody who gets stuck in a phase, if you like. So stuck in depression, can't function, can't get out of bed, stuck in anger, so angry the whole time, kind of uncontrollable emotions. So if you get stuck in one of those phases, then you know that maybe at that point it's worth seeing a counsellor, therapist. So you should be moving through the grieving process, but if you are really stuck in one and you're not functioning as a whole person, then you know that kind of grief has got the better of you.
And how do you feel about? I'm trying to be delicate here, but some people sort of build almost like a shrine, and you think, ooh. I mean, it's not for us to say. What I mean is, it's their grief. It's not our grief. It's not.
Yeah.
But you look at
everything as a healthy and an unhealthy component.
And exactly. So it's continuing bonds is really healthy. So as I said, to have memories of the person that died, but maybe shrines might be a bit too much. And if that's
that kind of creeps me out. But I get it, but I don't know how helpful it is.
I think
I don't know,
lots of people who have children that die don't touch their rooms for a very long time. So they keep everything as it was, almost a shrine to the child that died. And that's quite common.
But the thing is, when my mum got ill, when my dad died, and he died very suddenly, and I'm saying this in good taste, as deaths go, he won the jackpot because he was happy and healthy all his life, and he was out like that. And if the cards had to be dealt that way, any humane person would want the cards dealt that way for him. For us, it was an incredible loss. And my mum aged overnight. She went from an evolving being to a being that was frozen in time. And I feel she got stuck. I had a theory that it was unresolved trauma in the body, literally, physically, issues in the tissues. That sounds awful, but you know what I mean? Stored in the body, because I don't think she ever properly grieved. All her life, it's that kind of stiff upper lip British thing. Just get on with your life, just get on with your life. And that worked. It worked when her mum died. It worked all the way through her life until it didn't anymore. And it was as if she froze in time because she didn't grieve. And I guess that's why I asked you the purpose of it.
I also think trauma can absolutely cause that. So I think, years ago, we used to think PTSD was people coming back from war and seeing soldiers' arms red, but it's not anymore.
No,
so
trauma
and it gets stuck in the front part of your brain.
Stacey, let me leap in here. There is the world. This is where I get cross, not with you, but I do get very irate. As I'm modulating my tone in this way. You come back from the war and you've seen horrors that the three of us cannot imagine, and I would imagine all the people watching and listening around the world probably can't imagine. You think you can, you watched a few films, but you can't when it happens to you. Geez, you can't. And then someone says, oh, somebody looked at me, I didn't like the way they spoke to me, I've got PTSD. And I'm like, shut up. This has been so diluted. This is so diluted by cancel culture. It's so diluted by wokeness. It's a nonsense.
Oh, I agree.
I do think
blown you up here.
Yeah, but they do.
No one shot you in the arm.
But they do have now. They have proof. They've done tests now that, and what happens is when you do a trauma does occur, that it does get stuck in the front of your brain.
And that's why my mum had dementia.
And I understand what you're saying, Ross, that you can't compare it, but there are levels of PTSD as well.
being in an abusive relationship could cause PTSD, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would count. Being in a narcissistic
that's
relationship.
horrible. Yeah, right. That's horrible, and I go along with that. I don't get along with. Somebody said something, and I didn't agree with them. I've got PTSD. Shut up. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You're pathetic. Shut up about it.
But something like, your life partner, dying with no thought that they were going to die could cause you trauma, and it does get stuck in the body. The body holds the score.
Yeah. So
coming in from America, for everybody listening on Deluxe Radio, that's why we read it. At the end of the day, we must try focusing on the positive and intimate memories associated with the individual. Again, grief is a process, but the good news is that we don't have to live in that environment. I'm not sure, Asa, for the first time ever, I'm not sure I get the last sentence.
No, me neither. Could you explain what you mean?
Asa Don Brown, by the way, Stacey, is very high up in the psychotherapeutic community in the USA. So I don't understand the last sentence. So Asa, you're going to have to explain.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm not one of those sort of broadcasters that go, yes, that's right. And then they come out of the studio and go, I didn't understand a word of that. I've always been known for saying, if I don't get it, I don't get it.
Are you busy at the moment, Stacey? I bet you are.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I'm very busy because I am a bereavement therapist and I have private practice. And September, I think, always starts to get busy. And obviously, we have a mental health crisis. I see a lot of young adults as well. So I'm very busy with them.
Why September? I'm being thick probably, but why September?
I think just after the summer, really. I think it's kind of September and January normally I start.
January and February, I dread January and February.
Yeah.
Before we finish, can I just ask for 1 minute to share something at the end? Because I know you like to finish bang on, Russ. It's something important I'd like to share. Thank you. Oh, I don't mean now. I meant before the end.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
I was looking at anticipation. No, I don't want to interrupt your flow, Stacey. I'll do it at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, I do.
You don't go that on radio.
It's ironic that we work in communication, isn't it?
Yeah,
I do a lot of therapy online now. I do it on Zoom. Yeah. So, I can see people all over
Does
the world.
Does that work? I know that's how we have to run our lives. I've got an important Zoom call at 1:30. But in your line of work, which is very intimate, do you find that Zoom, because it's behind a glass screen, does that take away some of the intimacy if someone was sitting in your office or where
Look, I've always been a more face-to-face person, but I now realize that we can't see everyone face-to-face, and Zoom has brilliant results. I've been doing it now for a good few years.
You can have that energetic
before
connection.
The pandemic, I wouldn't have dreamt of doing Zoom, but I have great results over Zoom.
It's one of the few things that
build relationships now online.
Stacey, like one of the good things one of the few things that's come out of the pandemic is we realize, no, we don't have to get on the train and go to a meeting. Just switch on Zoom and have the same effect and cut out all the faff. Neil, when do you want to do this thing?
Well, it's just that someone I got to know ages ago, and he did put it publicly on Facebook, but just out of respect, I'm gonna change his name. So we call him George, and he put a post. He's suffering from depression at the moment, and it's like full on depression. He's in tears. He's in bed saying this is a bad day. And I wrote him a sort of open letter post on Facebook, which I would like to share.
Yes.
Might I share this?
Please go ahead.
George, I saw your post. I wanted to reach out to you, buddy. Depression is a liar. It feels awful and will drip feed you the worst possible scenarios about you. No hope, no point, no way out. And also be definitive that its opinion is the right one. If it were human, it would be a cross between a cowardly social media troll and the belligerent drunken Burke at the pub. I call BS on that. It's also the nature of any mental condition to feel isolated and you're the only one ever, and probably a burden too. Depression would happily feed you that line too. I call BS on that too. A dear friend is also a therapist who also treats people for eating disorders. Put it this way, we show people there's a life outside of their illness, not just the life inside it. And that must be possible, otherwise everyone will be depressed all the time. And that's not a universal truth. It can't be. My qualification is to say this. 2 years ago, my mental health had taken a dip. My experience was, as I healed, the triggers and dark times became less regular, less intense, less long. I know you've touched on that, Stacey. This seems to be a common pattern. Little sparks of light get more regular, more intense and longer. I've worked with therapists, become a passionate advocate for mental health, shared intimately with trusted friends and family, and put in 1 or 2 necessary boundaries. And I'm a lot better for it. I still have not the best days, but it's a lot less. There is life for you, George, outside of this, a reason for you to be here. And we, all the people that love you, care, or just kind-hearted souls that you meet online, they do exist, would tell you the same. You're not alone. You never were and never could be. I remember the charity gig we did with Zamo from Grange Hill and the Mankini incident as well. I'll leave that to your imaginations. Really happy to chat on the phone if you want to reach out, Longy. And I wanted to put that out there because I want to send him the link to this show and just to say that we are all behind you, George, and we have all got your back. And you've got this, my
Bless
friend.
you,
You can
Neil.
do it.
That was lovely. Stacey, thank you so
Stacey.
much. Your
Thank
timing.
you.
Bless you for finding the time to come on. Good luck with everything that you do, and I hope you'll come back and see us in the not too distant future.
Of course,
Because what
I'd
you're
love to.
doing, Stacey Hart, is damn important. That's it.
much
We're
needed.
completely out of time. Take care,
Thank you,
everybody. Neil and I will be back on Wednesday. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.